Thank you, everyone, for coming. I'm Alberto Diaz-Cayeros. I'm a senior fellow here at the Center for Democracy, Development, and Rule of Law. Today, we have this sort of joint event with the Europe Center and the Center for Latin American Studies, and it is a project that has to do with global history. Ana Grusmala-Dulce couldn't be here today, so I've been asked to step up and introduce our speaker today. So today we're going to be talking about gum and war, this is also partially funded by our global studies program here at Stanford. I should mention that as well. Martina Kaller, she's a dear friend, and she's professor in global history. She has a background in Latin American studies. She's right now a visiting scholar here at FSI. She has done research in various areas in Latin America, Mexico, Guatemala in particular, the United States, as well as European countries. She has been a guest professor here at Stanford a few years ago. She was the Austrian chair here in the history department, I guess. She has also been a visiting professor in the Sorbonne, in Paris. She has also been the head of a EU-funded international master's program in global studies at the University of Vienna, and also for 5 years. And this is something that people on this side of the Atlantic don't necessarily appreciate how important it is. The International Congress of Americanists is actually the oldest organization of Latin American studies in the world, period. And it's very vibrant in Europe and in Latin America. It is less visible, I think, in the US. So for me, it's also like a very important thing to have Martina with us here for that reason. Her primary focus has been on food history, on the history of food from a global perspective, and also the history of Latin America in the 19th and 20th century. And she has worked extensively on international development with a particular attention to Mexico and Latin America. Her publications are extensive, 2 books, 27 articles, book contributions. So Martina, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you to all of you joining here. I'm very pleased and happy that I have the opportunity to give this talk, and I want to thank all of you from the Europe Center, the CLAS, that this worked out. Often when I'm talking about chewing gum, or when I'm saying I'm writing the global history of chewing gum, people would laugh. Yeah, there was some joy, with the chewing gum being an object of studies. I decided, or not decided, but I'm doing something which has not been done before. That's by researchers. And before I start, I want to pass through this chewing gum, because if you're thirsty, this is the most important feature of chewing gum for giving it to soldiers who would not have access to fresh water. So if you're thirsty, just feel free to have one. I'm dividing my today's talk. It's more an insight into my workshop. I'm writing a book. I'm not sure whether this is going to be the title or the global history of chewing gum, but maybe that's with less intriguing. I will explain how briefly explain how chewing gum relates to war. I will give very brief remarks on what global history and global studies can do with such a topic. And then we will learn that in World War I and World War II, the gum and the supply for American troops would list under munition, not as food. And I also will touch very briefly on a chapter that's already finished. It's the 1920s, when chewing gum turned in an all-American commodity, already known in other places of the world. And then I will focus today on the place where it's extracted. And will give you insights that also in this place, in Central America, Mexican Yucatan, there was a significant war going on, and the chicle extraction and the selling and the smuggling this raw product, chicle, towards Belize, to the United States and Canada, was more about contrabanding this raw material. And I will explain how that relates to this local war in Central America. So let's start. This was, the beginning of my inquiry is resembled, is shown in this picture where you see how a GI, Second World War, occupational zone, gives chewing gum away to teenager and this little girl. That was a very frequent and often, recalled situation that the first contact with the GI in European and Japanese occupational zones would be, by giving away as a fraternizing gesture from the American troops is a little very cheap item. What I saw when I checked, the business history and all that background, I saw that there is a clear connection, a war connection, also to the preparations of war, the whole war industry, especially during or before Second World War. And what is not that much seen is this relation, the blue one, that how the raw material was obtained to produce chewing gum in huge quantities, in exceptionally huge quantities. I will give you some figures later. So this is what really started to interest me. This is a chiclero. That's a person who probably had tracked chicle from a sapodilla tree, and he's cooking it and producing the raw material that can be exported. And yeah, that should be it. Here, a very brief insight how I focus through global history, global studies. What is always the complaint in history is this deep Eurocentrism things over the choice of topics. And so what we are doing in global history and global studies, we do descend to the nation state. That means that even so, we are picking from a lot of material, also writings from national archives, journals, books, etc. We do not concentrate. That would not make sense with this topic at all. And then what we see is that it's not states that are actually connected, but regions. And I'm using the commodity fluid frontiers, not borderland, for explaining when it comes to different peoples who would exchange goods and knowledge. Then it's all about contact. So contact starts with occasional interactions. And then when the entanglements would be more elaborated and shown better, then we would say, it's a repeated contact, but not before institution building, when how I use it, an established contact zone was really can be identified. Then these contact zones would last at least for a period of time where the interaction is actually intense and kind of formalized, or in my case also not formal. And then also the timeline, the periodization, I will not go into that deeply, but if you want, we could do that, would differ quite a lot. If you approach a regional event or a regional topic and compare it to national history, or in our case, world history periodization. So I already said that chewing gum was listed already in World War I, but then intensively in World War II on the munition. And why was it munition? Because the cost of French water supply in a war situation, in a war theater, is really high. So there was rational behind that was more than the fun thing. And on the other hand, we have one company in the Second World War which actually dominated the chewing gum supply to the American forces and became number one chewing gum market, and it's Wrigley's. So I will exclude the other businesses here to get closer and clearer to my argument. What you can see here, that's a K ration, a breakfast union. You probably know well that troops were supplied with rations that also could help them to stay for a longer while apart from the camp. That was very important, crucial for fighting in remote places or when they get lost. So they had these supplies with them. There were various kinds of these supplies, and all of them had chewing gum in it. Water, thirst, yeah, and that was essential because if you're left somewhere or end up in a zone where there is no water, the chewing gum would be the choice. And in 1945, over 105 million of these rations were produced. Yeah? This is a big amount. Yeah? And additionally, also the camps were supplied, etc. Yeah, but only in this rations government did this. Chewing gum item also was included. It was also said it was a hard time to get, to know that munition explanation and the water explanation, because most of the sources would speak about, that it was for the soldiers to aid to keep up the spirits in the midst of hardship. That's something like a comfort thing. But when it comes, to showing and counting the amount, that would not be reasonable. I would at least assume. Yeah, I already had that. Substituting the water supply. Here there are two charts which show how much the chewing gum had become an all-American commodity. This is the announcement and also one footage of a very prominent anti-war film, The Big Parade, where you would see 5.04 minutes how the GI explains to the French young woman how to chew gum. Eventually, she would swallow it. It's a wonderful film, and this scene comes very early, minute 8 or so. So what it shows, that chewing gum was something unknown to at least in that time, to people in Europe and Japan and all the places where GIs would go and occupy. That's very important. That also includes the fluid frontier concept. And then there were a lot of publications in this time where it even would have said that chewing gum is known to almost every people under the sun. Very optimistic, and that was the goal. But the companies had a very hard time to find a market abroad, wherever, because of the because it was such an unusual. What was it? Fruit or a sweetie? There was no concept for chewing gum among at least the countries which I would study that were the defeated countries Germany, Italy, Austria. I cannot include Japan because I'm not able to check that sources. And here we have this very famous and wealthy man, William Wrigley, who had not invented anything, but he was a great advertising tycoon and made a fortune out of the sale of chewing gum. It was only chewing gum that they were producing and selling, no other business activities. So now I'm coming here to what I said, spaces, contexts, and timeline. What are the spaces? Of course, we have that the demand for chewing gum, especially in the Second World War, was extremely high. And here we have a quote which is saying that the Mexican imports are slowing down. And that was because it was over-harvested. I will come back to this detail. And but they could obtain 4,000 tons in 1942. Actually, this graph, it's really an amazing contribution by a Japanese colleague who is also Latin Americanist, Mexicanist. He did a calculation of how much chewing gum reached the United States. What is clear, these are the official numbers and the official amounts that are shown there, but what we can identify when there were peaks, also maybe on demand, that is not featured in this graph. But what doesn't show here is the amount of raw material which wasn't registered, which came into the country, I will come, diverse ways and also routes. And here comes, I already mentioned Yucatan into play, and it was the zone, only the single zone where this chicle from the zapatilla tree was obtained. It's a latex. Yeah, there are a lot of different latex, but also other gums which could be harvested from tropical forests. But in this zone that you can see here, that's part of the Yucatan Island, today Quintana Roo. Then British Honduras, it was Belize, was called like after that name. Then you have here a part which is Campeche, that was already one of the states of the new founded independent Mexico state. And then you have a proportion here in Guatemala. And this actually is the zone where the chicle could be harvested. Zapatilla tree cannot be grown in a plantation. Yeah, that's in the forest. Yeah, you have to know what it is, where to find it. And there is an additional characteristic or feature of zapatilla tree that you must not harvest them every year. Most, leave the most 5 years in between, if not, the tree would die. So it's something complicated to first get into the woods, to know how to obtain it, how to tap it, and how to proceed it. That was something which was known far times ago, and also chicle would have been chewed, at least according to records by the Florentine Codex by Chago. So it was known, and it was used also in different ways, also to protect roofs and cloth from, or waterproof them actually. And here we come to another war, and that's for me interesting because in what they call the Case War of Yucatan was a war that started in 1847 when indigenous people took over 3 cities prominent cities of the Yucatan Island. They were standing in front of Merida, the capital. They didn't take it over because they said that they officially noted that they had to go back to their place in order to work their milk and mice fields. Yeah, so they were agriculturalists. And and they occupied for more than 50 years a territory which would be located here above. I will show you a better map later. And this was an independent place. They didn't depend on anything from the Mexican government or any other hacendados or whatever. And that was their goal, to stay autonomous, because everything else, every contact would end up in forced labor situation, plus even worse conditions. So they knew what they did. What I'm asking myself, or what was I asking myself, is how could they get weapons, rifles, and gunpowder down there? Yeah, it's inaccessible. It was also, this region was inaccessible for Spanish groups always. That was not a novelty that they were living independently, but that they would agree. Yeah, the Mexican main cities of the peninsula, that was new, and they were very successful in it. And to obtain there for more than 50 years at least, I would even say more, because I'm focusing on this product, this raw material trading product. Here you can see a very, for me, interesting image, because it shows you professional chiquero. They only started to work in that zone after 35 with Lázaro Cárdenas time, and there were gangs, who didn't have anything to do with the indigenous people, but that was the way how it was featured in the United States, because these were, of course, pioneers. These were very brave men who would make it into the forest and extract that chicle. These were people who didn't respect the botanical or the cycle of the tree, and really they ended up exploiting the forest to such an extent that chicle was almost not available on the market, on the official market, already ending for around 1942 about. And so it was restricted, selling of chewing gum was restricted to the troops, ordinary people wouldn't be able to buy it because it was not available anymore. This bowl would be, what they may be, that you have an idea how this product was exported. They cooked it into such bowls, and these balls could, be transported in baskets or barrels or any other kind available. So now I'm coming to the context and the concept of fluid frontier. We could also talk about a form of society which was particular, because also ethnicity-wise, you have so many different peoples and also individuals joining these rebels, not because they wanted to fight, but they were involved in illegal kind of illegal trade, we would say, first with logwood, then mahogany, and eventually chicle. So this would kind of show the controlled territory. The map is not very good, so I'm using here a tourist map to show you where this contraband zone, and that's actually here. You see the border of this strait here, but this border was a natural border and not controlled by any government really in the time we are speaking. And there is a river, the river Rio Hondo, which marks this borderland. It was not recognized by Mexicans until the end of the 19th century, but there's details. What you need or what we could see if, we better zoomed it, but anyway, here, the Rio Hondo, ¿cómo se llama?
No, cinto or desemboca. How do you say that?
That happens
No,
to me
where
when I'm
it flows in
speaking
the
about
ocean.
Mexican.
The mouth of the river.
The mouth of the river. Yeah,
The delta?
yeah, the delta, the mouth of the river.
Oh, it drains.
Drains.
Oh,
it
it
drains.
see where my mouth. It drains, actually, it drains. So I do not have access to this map anymore because I moved something. This is also a relatively good map that will show you, where's my bird? Oh, yeah. Because I don't see it here anymore. Unknown. You would see here, down here, the Bay of Chetumal, the river mounting into this bay area from which it could be shipped out, because this orange region is British Honduras, Belize today. And you might know that that was quite a convict place. Yeah? The British Empire never really encouraged any settling there. It was a kind of an outpost for trading logwood, mahogany later, and then chicle. But whereas logwood, dyewood, and mahogany had a market in Europe, there was a demand, and there was a reason that these fine woods would be shipped over to Great Britain or any other part of Europe, because previously it was the Spaniards who were into that business, but with the violent situation, they lost their dominance in it. But chocolate was not a product in demand. And in Great Britain or other parts of Europe. Here, this is it's very hard to find real good maps, not only on online, but also physical. And that is a question for itself. So here, this is Yucatan. This is this bay, Bayo Obispo, as it was called before it became Chetumal, renamed Chetumal. And here you can see how ships could or would travel to back here. And this was a very well-known road, unofficial, clandestine road for ships and also businessmen from British Honduras to ship out all kinds of items. For instance, they were big in shipping alcohol during Prohibition time, and they would unload it from Corpus Christi to the Tempe. Yeah, so there were a lot of places where they could smuggle in that product, and what they did get back were more than anything else weapons, and ammunition. And this was a known trade already during the time, let's say around 1850 ongoing. Yeah, that's not, it's very hard to get reliable proof, but anyway, it's known. I cannot tell you the quantities, but given the feature before of the exports, of the official exports, knowing that it was at least double of it, we have to find and have to understand these spaces, which was not skillful or the smaller region, but also the whole region of the Gulf of Mexico, where this product was shipped in. Here, I could have chosen so many different proofs, or not only proofs, but documents that would say something similar as this article in Excelsior. It's a very old newspaper, first released in 1917. It still exists in Mexico, and it says in 1990 that Mayas, that was the way how these indigenous groups were called. They themselves never called them Maya. That was the notion that came up after the revolution time in Mexico, to handle the diversity of indigenous people in whatever region here in Yucatan. And the Mayas were happily traveling across the southern border to Belize. And they would take with them several items like chicle, cabinet, woods, hides, and bits, and they would exchange these products with the Belizean businessmen, most, and also the loggers who were working on the one and the other side of the Rio Hondo, and they were purchasing or exchanging weapons from British chicle merchants. This is one of the many documents that I could find which mentions this ongoing illegal trade, contraband, or how you would call it. So what we see in this contact zone, and I'm referring again to this border, this natural border between Mexico and British Honduras, and also the Bay of Chetumal, because supposedly they had to clear customs there, but there was a whole way of avoiding that, and also including officials in this illegal trade. And so what we can see, that there were plenty of different groups and people who had interest in this zone, who were present or at least pushing at it. So there was the Catholic Church, the Yucatecos, that would be the Hacendados in general speaking. Los Pacíficos, this was another indigenous group which allied with the Catholic Church, and so fought the groups of the other group of indigenous people in the peninsula. Then only in the end of the 19th century, the Mexican Federal Army was able to penetrate, to get into that zone. And then there was also in this time the first companies, extraction companies would be established, the Compañía Mexicana, who would officially, as good as they could, export chicle to the north, to the United States. Then only, I mentioned that before, in the time of the Lázaro Cárdenas government then, or administration, they would formalize the kind of organize this vast region, appointing ejidos, concessions, and cooperatives. And this were, this modern chicleros. And on the other side, I already mentioned the Cruzat. They were worshipping a cross. That's cruz is, or the term cruz is Spanish, the old is, and ending in their Yucatec kind of Maya language. And there were the logging gangs from British Honduras, who also since 1870 until 1940 would deal in this raw material chicle. Of course, we have the contrabandists, and we have this here was chicle concession British Honduras, and with this I will come to the end of the story. And we had also this man here, the rebel leader, General Francisco Maipech, and I will now for the end with Robert Curtin and Francisco Maipech. Who were they? Just to give you an insight. Robert S. Curtin was the first millionaire of Belize. He was, for instance, a person who would trade or contraband the alcoholic beverages to the north during Prohibition. He engaged especially in transportation along the Riondo and also in the Chetumal Bay. He was really a big person in this business. And Turton was in many ways a very interesting figure because for our purpose, he was for 25 years a concessionist for Wrigley in the zone. So we need to add, these exports, which were more or less legal. Actually, we only can estimate how big that business was, but as he became very rich, became really, that was when he died, 1955, it was said that he was had about 43.7 million Belize dollar. The half of it would be US dollars, so kind of 23 million. That was huge money at that time. And if you look at the features, I have to draw attention to it because Robert Sidney Turton was his youth, his childhood was quite difficult because he was the son of British lieutenant in British Honduras, and a very modest mother who was domestic, working for expats in Honduras. We all can imagine how that happened. The father leaves, dies, doesn't will anything to his son, his only son, and that was it. So Turton had to leave school on the age of 9, and then he became this self-made man. And because it said, and I have a document where the grandson of Turton, is describing his life, and he said he never liked Englishmen. He favored all business with less companies. Also, maybe because of that background. And we know how big that business was. Where did he get? And of course, they all were still trading armament. That was the most notorious situation, in northern Belize, and that was, also a major reason why businessmen would be there, additionally to the log main and the camps there. Here, this is General Francisco Maipech. He was for an indigenous man. Would say Maya. He belonged to the Krusov party in that conflict, and these were the rebels. And he became their commander, kind of, in 1915. And he was a very smart person who negotiated with the federal army and negotiated with the Mexican state that was already, after the period years and the whole, troublesome moment after the revolution, the Mexican Revolution, and he negotiated that they would dedicate themselves to only picking chiclet or tapping chiclet and not, of course, exchange them anymore for weapons. And he also got personal concessions there. So, where's my pad? I need to read this very short mark from one source that says, on February 14, 1929, it was learned that May was exporting chicle clandestinely to Robert S. Turton in Belize. They seized a ship, the San Jose, owned by May, and discovered that the employees of the Secretaría de Agricultura y Fomento, that was those of Customs, and the head of the federal detachment in here, Chico, that was a military port, were involved in this magic. Now, you have all kinds of people, all kinds of ranks, collaborating in this fluid frontier, in this particular space, and that has an effect on this war, had an effect on the success. Yes, because it was the longest lasting indigenous autonomy in all over the entire history of Latin America, at least which we know well. And and it was, this situation, and this is so interesting for me to see this informality on all sides, because also the fraternizing attitude, all that, making themselves visible as freedom bringers, etc., from the American side, that also has to do with fluid commodity frontiers. And then I promised this in the right timelines, but we do not get into it because that also requires a very detailed knowledge of the war in Yucatan. Thank you so much for your attention. And
Thank you, Martina. Thank you for this. I think we're not actually in the Center for Latin American Studies in Bolivar House, but I suspect this would probably be the first time we get a talk about Belize, about British Honduras, which is this kind of thing that happens when you decenter the nation state. That's the way we organize a lot of our thinking. So I did want to mention that before I open up for discussion. So we have some Zoom audience. If you have a question on Zoom, I think we are able to convey those to Martina, but I will probably start here in the room by asking those of you who want to make a question, if you can introduce yourselves first. Yes.
I'm from Belize. I was born in Belize. So I connect with the history, but I didn't know that Wrigley chewed gum. So just connecting the history informed me more of my homeland. So thank you. I found this topic personally very fascinating to me.
thank you very much. I think that's a great one.
For the Zoom.
I still have my micro.
Okay,
Right?
good.
Thank you very much. Knowledge. I've been to Belize, and I've been to the zone, and also the Riondo, and it really makes a difference when you know the geography, even now in the 21st century. That's what I'm also always saying to my global studies and global history students. You have, to be there. You have to see it. You have to see this movement. You have to see these rivers. You really can imagine how things worked. Because nowadays they often would say to me that they would not travel to Latin America or elsewhere because of the ecological impact, or saying, we can get everything on the internet. You don't get this particular impression on the internet.
Do I need a mic? No.
Yeah, I don't know.
For recording, for
stable mic,
video? Okay, table's mic. Great. Thank you, Professor Haller, for that amazing talk. I wonder if you could tell us. Sorry?
Introduce yourself.
I'm Hector Hoyos, Director of the Center for Latin American Studies and a professor of Iberian and Latin American cultures and comparative literature. Good to meet you all. I was thinking of John Tully, the Devil's Milk, the social history of rubber, and how the other members of the Evea family, Evea brasiliensis, right, have been historicized. A lot has been written about latex and rubber in the Amazon region. In that book by Tully, the bubblegum thing, right, the bubblegum phenomenon, the chicle phenomenon, is a mere footnote. So I was wondering if you could tell us how your work changes the paradigm of thinking about rubber writ large, not just chicle, but the latex family.
Thank you for the question, Hector. The reply is very easy. Yeah, on the one hand, and then it's very complicated if we go into details. The easy explanation is that there was no subtile chicle tree, yeah, available elsewhere than in this zone. And rubber does not work for chewing gum. It's definitely too hard. And even there is a folktale around in popular literature in the US that the chewing gum was invented by the first businessman who set up a factory, Thomas Adams, and that he would try to vulcanize this chicle, but it didn't work. So it doesn't work, on one or the other way. So do not connect necessarily rubber with chicle, but what could be connected is the elegant, the sisal boom in the other part of the Yucatan island that is very well studied and Steven Wells, and I have to say the literature about this war and the situation in Yucatan is really amazing. There's plenty done. And but that's a footnote in the chicle business, that there was also ule, rubber harvested in these woods, but it didn't come to any prominence. Whereas sisal was almost an externally directed big business in the arid zone of Yucatan. And there, the American concessions and also the technologically skilled people rushed into that was a market which was not controlled by the government, but controlled by the oligarchs of this region, like Plutarco Molina, but that will be details that we can talk.
So they're both raw materials that get exported north and are part of extractivism, but with a very different inflection, right? It's once you look into the detail, it's quite fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
So are you saying that up till now, nobody has been able to synthesize artificially that component that is in the chiclet rubber?
Oh,
No, thank you so much for this very important question. I should have mentioned that before when I passed through the chewing gum box, that Mexico, really the territory, Mexico and Belize, they were running out of this raw material due to overexploitation. It was a clear extractivist economy till then. And on the other hand, there were all these people in their laboratories trying to substitute the chicle base of chewing gum, and they succeeded. So by the Korean War, most of the gum already was produced from a polyethylene. That means also, to make a long story short, that when you throw away your used chicle, you should deposit it in the plastic bin, a garbage bin, because it is plastic on what you are chewing, and not this raw material anymore, because the demand grew bigger and bigger, and that was also, from my point of view, it was not about the advertising, the business advertising. It was technically and also actually through the contact with GIs in occupational zones.
So Martina, you're sharing the real thing or the plastic?
Sorry, I should have. I know a place in San Francisco where I could have bought. But for the next time, I will bring it, and you will feel how it doesn't taste different, but the masticatory experience, the mouth experience is very different. So there is still, a small organic market, kind of a fair trade market, where you can buy this chicle-based chewing gums.
We have a question from the internet. Yeah, let's get that one first.
Yes.
And I'll get to you.
So the question is, was Wrigley the only company at the time producing chewing gum? If not, how and why was it the one that was selected to purchase all of this gum and to enhance the profits of the owners of the firm?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's also very important. I mentioned it very briefly that there were several companies operating the business, but and especially Adams, who then founded the American chicle company, fusioning a lot of smaller producer and they were particularly important. Adams was more important in World War I than in World War II. But the big business went to Wrigley's until today, even though it's not an American company anymore. It was fused with Mars Inc. And that Mars is the biggest supplier of all sweeties. When you go to the supermarket and you're standing here next to the cashier, you can be sure that's all Mars company what you're buying. And even though there are different brands or they look like different brands, they are all owned by the same company. And that was already the case in the after 1950 that Wrigley's would not only sell the Spearmint, which was the most prominent brand, but a lot of others. For instance, Orbit. Orbit was the first chewing gum that didn't contain sugar. At the beginning, it was a very toxic thing, and they had to remove it from the market. But anyway, these are all stories, which are included in my curiosity. And also, have to do with global history.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Mikhail Wolf in the history department. I've written about history of Mexico, but not this. And okay, so first I want to start with, I recall chewing gum when I was a kid, and the property of it that I recall most, I occasionally chew gum sometimes, but is that it's very sweet when you start, and then the sweetness runs out, and you want to get another piece of gum. So I was wondering, you mentioned that it was not listed as a prohibition in the 1920s. And so my question is, how did that happen? Was it ever considered an addictive product? In the sense that you also put up a slide that I think it was the Aztecs even were chewing it, which is interesting in itself because it's produced in the Mayan area. So it was the Aztecs were chewing it. So maybe that relationship you could tell us about. But just my question is just more like, how did it become chewing gum and even bubble gum later on for children? When it started as this sort of almost like palliative medicinal kind of product. If soldiers were using it to calm down and what have you.
Yeah, it was, said that it calms nerve, and that's clear because when you're chewing, you also stay alert, and it is a sensation of food intake. I would say, even though the taste, you're completely right. I'm addicted to gum chewer and a gum chewer, and I can tell you that the taste disappears very quickly. The Aztecs, there is something which I cannot, contest really, because I'm not working. The prehistory or the ancient history of Mesoamerica is that it's often said in literature that they didn't have contact because the Aztec Empire lasted very shortly compared to the Maya empires, which already were declined, etc. But obviously there was a kind of trade, through intermediaries or whatever. If not, someone would not have this icon, which was painted by locals, in their own way of writing, the picture. The addiction, that is a very, very interesting story, and I was asked by the publisher, future publisher, to add more about it. And then I found out the following, that first, all over the world, always people would chew something, mostly raisins, without any additional taste, or integrado, or that they did not have an additional taste or was not sweet. So this is one thing. The other thing is that the worst in wars, and you as a historian will know that, there were always drugs involved. When we now think about the atrocities that the Hamas is committing, was committing in Israel, then we know from sources which are not, that up on the news, that they are using fentanyl drugs to get them into this stage that they can commit such atrocities. And that was always in all wars, there would be particular drugs given to the fighters. Mostly it was alcohol. Then in the late 19th and also 20th century, it was all kind of drugs, medicine, and it was more than anything, medicine that pushes up, that kind of makes you more or braver to say, and face really challenging situations. There's even, there, I should not mention that because I already had Hamas. But so every had their particular, and now it's more national history, drinks. They would have given, British basically always rum, basically destas of all kinds, the Russians, vodka, etc. And there is something which I have not studied enough, but my assumption is that due to the debate on prohibition, and that was an ongoing current discussion in the United States before World War I, and there are statements that say our troops, our boys, are sober, and instead, and it was often also claimed that instead they are getting chewing gum, which would be the American energizer without causing addictions in the individuals who would have it. So that makes, that kind of oversheds my assumption of the lack of water in war theaters and such difficult situations when they were squatted in all places. But it has to do something with the propaganda. Of course, when Roosevelt takes over presidency in 1935, they also abolished this prohibition law because then, the war industry and everything, required all forces and all types also of drugs. Second feature, also these factory workers who were working to prepare and endure the war, because the US Army and US military forces were, if I'm not mistaken, but that's what I would say, were the second troops in the world who took all supplies with them, who brought everything overseas, food and all kinds of drugs, everything, they loaded entire ships with their items. And the container shipping as we know it today has a lot to do with the experience of transporting such huge quantities of materials, but also foods. And that was my initial interest, why, did the laboratory, the military laboratory, invent such thing as soluble coffee, or why would they operate the dry milk powder, etc., etc. And then it was chewing gum that I was selecting, and going back, that is, I see the supermarket today, as that really resembles all of that history, because of the packaging. And when we come back to chewing gum, it's lightweight. It has an almost eternal shelf life. Yeah, as long as you keep it dry. It is industrial produced. Yeah, so supply is not an issue. And yeah, that would, and transportation, of course, the lightweight. Yeah, makes it an ideal product. And again, it's cheaper fresh water, which needed to be obtained on site.
So I am going to have to stop. Maybe 1 30-second question. Yes.
My question is more so technical. First, my name is Amia Karim Maikan. I'm an undergrad here at Stanford, and I'm also Maya. So like this history is something very personal to my family. So I'm just kind of curious to know what informed your work on the historical aspect of the Yucatan Peninsula. Like what were you reaching out to inform the historical aspect? I feel like I'm writing my own honors thesis on my Maya community, and I find that oftentimes a lot of the research I'm reading are not reflective of the histories that my family has told me orally. So I'm just kind of curious to know what informed your work. Is it only like scholarly research, or was it like informing through like community-based outreach?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And thank you for coming to share this talk. From your perspective, I would say, and I have reasons, and I have read about and a lot of literature that is dividing, groups of indigenous people. Yeah, that was nothing which came from the original peoples. That was nothing which came from the colony. It was something that after the Instituto Nacional Indigenista was established, and I get the end of 1940s. Yeah. Then they started, to organize or kind of understand the indigenous groups according their language. And when we come to the Maya language, we know that it spreads through Guatemala, northern Honduras. Yeah, so that these people kind of understand themselves when the genocides happened in Guatemala, they would crossing, the green border, and would be well received in the neighboring states, especially Chiapas. So they have something in common that's clear, yeah. And what nowadays happens, or since 1992, basically, yeah, or even earlier, that the indigenous people are studying themselves, yeah, a lot through oral history. There is another feature, that's their position, their version of history that needs to be also included, and there is very good work on it. And in order to understand the new colonizing activity by the government, by the Mexican federal government with Tren Maya, you have to understand this part of the history. That's what your your family is telling you, because that's another way of exploiting the region without leaving anything behind what could be really an advantage for most of the people in Yucatan.
It seems like the perfect spot to finish our conversation. Martina, thank you so much. Thank you to the Center for Latin American Studies, the Europe Center, and Global Studies, and thank you all for being here with us.